Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lunch Break Science. I'm Ariel Johnson, your host from the Leakey Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting human evolution research and sharing discoveries in programs like this. Today's episode takes a look at what we can learn about human evolution from teeth. But before we take a bite out of today's topic, we'd like to thank the Ann and Gordon Getty Foundation and Camilla and George Smith, whose generous support made today's episode possible. Now, let's bring in our guest, Leakey Foundation grantee Shara Bailey. Shara, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me. It's always such a pleasure to talk with you, Ariel.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here.
We always have a
Shara,
good time.
oh, yes, I know we do. Shara is joining us from New York, where she is professor of anthropology and director of the Center for the Study of Human Origins at New York University. Her research looks at human evolution from a dental perspective, and this research has taken her all around the world to Italy, and Europe, the cradle of humankind in South Africa, and far-flung Indonesia. And these are just a few locations to name. She'll be talking about more of them a little later. Before we hear more about fossil teeth from Shara, though, if you are, that's a beautiful cave. I'm sorry. Before we hear more about fossil teeth from Shara, if you're watching this episode live, please post questions or comments for Shara in the chat, and she will be answering those questions live during the episode. The earlier you get those questions in, the more likely your question will be featured. So in 2017, Shara spoke for the Leakey Foundation at the Houston Museum of Natural Science. This lecture, Rewriting Modern Human History, has subsequently become one of our top 2 most viewed lectures of all time, which is awesome. And we will be sharing the link to this chat in case you haven't seen it and would like to check it out. I'm just so excited to have the opportunity to work with you again and feature in our program, Shara.
Me too. Glad to be here.
So today we are delving into teeth. Shara, why are teeth such an important part of the puzzle when it comes to understanding human evolution?
Well, Ariel, teeth are kind of the unsung heroes, I think, of anthropology. I mean, most people outside of anthropology have no idea all the wonderful, amazing things that we can learn about humans living and in the past just by looking at their teeth. And even anthropologists tend to like to focus on faces, right? Or skulls. They just are sexier somehow, more interesting. But, you know, the thing is that teeth preserve better than any other part of the body. They are super hard. They're like 93% mineral and content. And as a result, most of what we know about evolution, human evolution, and other animals comes from the teeth, because that's mostly what we find. The other good thing, and here are just some pictures of some of the hundreds of teeth that are from a 130,000-year-old site from Klapina, Neanderthal site. The other cool thing about teeth is that the morphology, the bumps and grooves or fissures and cusps that I'll be talking about, are largely determined by our genes. And so if you can't extract DNA, which is now becoming like a really cool thing that we can do, if you can't do that because the material is too old or it comes from, let's say, Africa, a tropical region, we can look at the teeth, because people who have teeth that look similar are probably more closely related than people who have teeth that look dissimilar. And we can then use that knowledge to look back into time. And also teeth have a lot of information. So I study the bumps and grooves, like I said, and the morphology, but other people, like my student, Paula Cerrito, has been studying the cementum, which is a thin layer of bone-like substance that covers the root and helps keep the tooth in our mouth. And she's found that you can find, if you look hard enough, you can actually find evidence of childbirth and menopause just from looking at disruptions in the cementum. And then my colleague, Tanya Smith, who I worked with at the Max Planck Institute, she does work on microstructure that looks at the growth rings in teeth and uses that to infer the age of an individual at death, and also all sorts of other, the rate of growth, and all sorts of other really, really cool things. Not things I do, but really cool things you can do with teeth.
It's really fascinating. What are the methods that you used when you study teeth?
So I focus on morphology, as I said. So I look at cusps and fissures and the patterns and the relationships of these things. And so if we were to look at a Neanderthal tooth and a Homo sapiens tooth and put them side by side, you would see that the Neanderthal tooth here on the right has a bigger hypocone, which is the kind of knobby thing, the cusp in the lower left corner, than the cusp next to it. And in the modern human, if we could just see that again, in the modern human, which is on the left, those two cusps are more or less the same size. And that gives the modern human tooth a square shape and the Neanderthal tooth a rhomboid or skewed shape. Now, back in the Stone Age, when I was doing my dissertation, the way I measured that was actually to take a photo of the tooth, put little points on the cusp tips, and then draw a polygon. And then I would measure the angles of that polygon. And I also looked at the relative size of that polygon compared to the size of the whole tooth. And nowadays, we've got really sophisticated methods that we can look at, put plots all the way around the outside of the tooth, these landmarks or semi-landmarks that capture even more of that shape more accurately, let's say. Although I have to say that it's a lot of work and we tend to get the same results. But even more like new methods that we're using now, doing 3D, which is becoming more and more available to people, that's going to allow us to look at cusp heights and cusp relationships in three-dimensional space, which I think is turning out to be even more informative than the methods that we've been using.
It's so neat, and I'm really looking forward to digging deeper into that during your talk. But one of my favorite things about lunch break science is getting the opportunity to share the backgrounds of our guests. I really feel like it helps show why it's so important to have different backgrounds and perspectives to bring to the table when asking questions about our evolution. And Shara, I got to hear your story back in Houston when you gave outreach presentations at several schools that we visited. And your presentation were actually one of the things that inspired me to include this component in our series. So when did you become interested in studying evolution, and what was your path to where you are now?
So I think my first foray into evolution was a book I wrote in 5th grade about the evolution of the horse. I was fascinated by this idea that horses, these big, huge things. I've always been in love with horses. I had a horse. Her name's Idol. You can see me here at 14 with my horse. And I was fascinated by the fact that something like this came from a little dog-like animal with 4 toes, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. So I wrote and I illustrated. I couldn't find the book, but I did find a painting that I did about the same time. So this was the quality of my art back then. I know I have the book, but I couldn't seem to find it for the show. So that, and it's funny that I kind of put that aside. I was always interested in science and math, but I think art took I don't know, my mom was an artist, and so I kind of followed that path. But in the end, my parents didn't really encourage me to become an artist. Who knows why, right? and so I ended up, kind of going off towards the science end more and studying psychology. I was always interested in the way the brain works. I still am interested in memory and how we learn. And I tie that into my mentoring even today. And while I was doing my psychology major, I took a class called Intro to Biological Anthropology, and I took it because it counted as a science credit. And I love to tell my students this story because most of them are taking, my intro class because it counts, as a lab science. And I tell them, don't worry, it's okay. Don't be ashamed, because that's how I got here. Anyway, I fell in love with anthropology. And from that moment on, I decided I had to double major in anthropology. And luckily, I was at a point where I could actually just tack on a bunch of classes, and I managed to get that double major. But in the end, I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, and I still wasn't quite sure if I wanted to do psychology or anthropology. So I took a career test, which people should know is available through your university career center at Temple. And it turns out that somebody who likes to dig in the dirt and be outside all the time is probably better suited to being an anthropologist or an archaeologist than a psychologist who might spend their time, cutting off the heads of rats and looking at their brains. So I did my undergraduate at Temple University, figured this out there, and decided to go out to Arizona State University to get my PhD in anthropology. And one of the reasons I chose there was because I had read about Christy Turner's work on reconstructing Native American origins based on teeth. I had learned about that in an archaeology class of all things. And I thought that was really fascinating. But I also, full disclosure, I've always just been really fascinated with the American Southwest. My mother traveled, my grandmother traveled around the Southwest by herself in her little blue Volkswagen, and brought back stories and Navajo blankets and I don't know, maybe the horse thing, cowboys and Indians, I don't know, but I've always loved the Southwest. And so off to Arizona State University I went, studied with Christy Turner, learned dental anthropology. And then the Institute of Human Origins came to ASU, and I got introduced to luminaries like Meave Leakey and Leslie Aiello and Don Johansson and my mentor Bill Kimball, and I just realized that I wanted to take what I learned from Christy Turner on dental anthropology and apply it to human evolutionary studies. So I did that, got my PhD, and then was recruited by Jean-Jacques Houblin to work at the Max Planck Institute. Actually, that was after I did a postdoc at George Washington University with Bernard Wood. I almost forgot that, but I ended up at the Max Planck Institute, and the whole process, right? From there until when I took my job at NYU in 2015, that's like a 12, 13 year process, right? Which seems like a long time, but everything I did in that time was useful. All the data I collected, all the people I met, the relationships I made, it was all a learning process and all a wonderful, wonderful journey.
Many scientists, in addition to doing research, or also create. You've told me that beyond that first book on horse evolution that you created, that you still create art.
I do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I think it's really important. Creativity is to a scientist, and if you talk to most scientists, you will learn that they do creative things as well. Ralph Holloway plays the trumpet. Will Harcourt Smith plays the clarinet. I've had a friend who used to do these amazing drawings of, I don't know, cartoon kind of. Anyway, so I paint. I have painting in my background as well. And I think that, while I'm painting, while I'm walking, I do a lot of walking. This is when I'm actually most creative, and some of my best ideas come when I'm actually not trying to think about science, but I'm just letting my mind go and I'm thinking about other things. So yeah, I think creativity is super important. And so, although some people, wonder if you can, or get kind of confused, like, are you an artist or are you a scientist? I think there's a lot of room to be both.
These are just gorgeous pieces.
Thank you.
So what is your medium?
I paint in oil, mostly. That one that just came up was acrylic. If I want to paint quickly, I paint in acrylic. And if I want to do something like the one that's showing up now, which might take me 10, 20 hours, then I'm painting in oil. So, and I like this kind of, I don't know, there's a little bit of, I don't know what it is, nostalgia, isolation, quiet, that I like about a lot of these things that I paint. And this one, that sunset is actually a view from my friend's house in Montana. That's like their view every night.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, and you have been all over the world. What are some of the places you've been and the collections you've gotten to work with?
Well, the collections are in amazing places, like let's say Paris, France, right? So the Musée de l'Homme, where a lot of the modern human collections, comparative collections that I've looked at, is right by the Eiffel Tower. I've taken my family to Spain, to the Sierra de Atapuerca, to see the Cima de los Huesos, Grandolina, Cima de Elefante. I've traveled to Hungary, the Natural History Museum in Hungary, Budapest. I was in Russia when I was 7 months pregnant in January, trying to skate my way over the sidewalks, which they do not salt or take the ice off of. Right. I've been to Israel. I've gone to Mount Carmel and seen the caves of Tabun and School. Gone to Jerusalem, walked down the streets that Jesus walked down. I've been to Morocco, North Africa. Here's pictures of me and my colleagues, Tanya Smith there in the middle, where I already talked about where to goat roast here. So I got to eat goat. I even got to see and study Lucy's, real fossils in Ethiopia. There's me holding her tiny little jaw and just
It's amazing.
amazing. I've been to the Cradle of Humankind where there's a whole bunch of sites, and Ron Clark actually personally took me down to see Littlefoot here. You can see when it was still in the cave. They've since taken it out and it's in the lab, and they're still trying to extract it from that breccia, which is like cement. Hopefully I'll get to study that one's teeth someday. I've been to Cape Town where there are fossils, but there are also comparative modern human collections. There's Table Mountain there. And I think the Ezekiel Museum is going to come up next. Beautiful, right? I mean, what a place to work.
Yeah.
I feel so lucky, you know. And I've been to Indonesia to see the Hobbit, right? The Homo floresiensis. And you know, what's funny is before I was 22, I had never been outside the United States. And then when I was at the Max Planck Institute, which was such I don't know, a gift in a way, because I got to travel like 80,000 miles a year when I was there. I was rarely home for more than a week, just going here, there, and yeah, which was nice because I got, you know, all the frequent flyer miles and sometimes got to go
Yeah.
business class. Yeah, it was good. So it's been a wonderful journey.
Yeah, I seem to remember because you I think you had to like learn languages kind of on the fly too.
Oh yeah. I had to learn. I learned Russian. Yeah, because I mean, I learned Russian, right? I learned the alphabet, which is actually huge, because when you're on the subway, you know, the subway station name comes up and you can read it, and they're saying something, but you don't know if they mean the same thing, right? So for me, just learning the alphabet and knowing how things would be pronounced helped me get off at the right stop in Moscow. Yeah, yep. And I learned German, well, you know, whatever, past and present tense before I went to Leipzig. And yeah, but they're all in one mixed up foreign language drawer now. So don't. Yeah,
okay, yeah, no.
In my brain, you know what I mean?
So what is the importance of establishing connections and networking?
Well, that's a good thing for you to ask, Ariel, because this is one thing that I mean, I've received great mentorship, but the one thing I didn't get a lot of good information on was how important networking is in a career. In fact, I would say it's as important as looking at the fossils themselves. And so one thing I tell my students now is when you're trying to figure out how long you need to be somewhere, you know, based on how long it takes you to whatever, study the teeth or do whatever, double that. Right, so that you have time to go for an extended lunch with somebody. Here's Nick Conard and Zhao Zhilao coming up. And this is a wonderful conference we were at in Bonn. We were all on this ferry. There's Jakub Radovcic, who curated the Neanderthal remains I showed you earlier. These are the people who then become your extended family. Nor Farson, who curated the Mauer mandible, 500,000-year-old. Neanderthal or Neanderthal ancestor. Jean-Jacques Hublin here on the right, the director of the Max Planck Institute, and Lu Wu next to him. All these people become your extended family. And the thing is I do know for a fact that there are probably collaborations I missed out on, fossils I didn't get to write up because I didn't make those connections. And so you're with these people for the long haul, right? Take the time to get to know them. If they know about you and your interests, you might share interests. I mean, it could just be so much richer.
Oh yeah. So beyond and then like it influences your, you know, mentorship of other students and beyond the research that you do, and you have a lot of other responsibilities as a NYU professor. So could you tell us a little bit of what it's like to be a full professor?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I think a lot of people are like me, a lot of students are like me, where you think, well, when I get my PhD, I'll be done, right? Or then when you're done that, you're like, oh, when I get my job, I'll be done. Or then it's like, oh, when I get tenure, I'll be done. And so on and so on. But the thing is, at each level that you achieve, which is fantastic, then you actually get more and more responsibilities. And the focus tends to shift towards sometimes a little away from research. I still do research, but you know, not as much as I used to, because I'm working on doing really meaningful things for the university or for my department, or mentoring students. I'm building a mentoring program for undergraduates right now. I'm hoping to roll it out in the next year, kind of a coaching program on how, not just anthropology people, students, but anybody, you know, because it's not always easy to get through college. And then you have your graduate students. I had 2.5 dissertations dropped into my inbox on Monday this week, you know, that I have to get through in the next 2 weeks. And so, you know, mentoring students takes a lot of time, but it's actually the thing I have to say I enjoy most at this point in my career. And so it's a lot, and the job changes. And as much as people will say to me, gosh, you only teach 2 classes, what do you do with the rest of your time? Which, you know, makes me scoff and roll my eyes. You know, we really are doing a lot of very meaningful things, even if it's not teaching a class. I participate at the World Science Festival, for example, every year. Here's Parkside Prep. They came and learned what it was like to be an anthropologist. And it's these people, you know, they end up emailing me at least one a year. And that might not seem like a lot, but it's still very meaningful if somebody emails you and says, hey, something you said changed my life. Or, hey, I'm in Darwin, Australia, and I was thinking about the time you told us this in class, and just reaching out to tell, you know, I mean, that's just, for me, is the greatest reward of all of this.
Well, I'm really excited to jump into your talk and hear more about teeth. But before we turn the virtual floor over to Shara, if you are watching this episode of Lunch Break Science and enjoying it, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and tap the little bell to receive reminders, or follow us on Facebook or Twitter to receive reminders of upcoming episodes. So now let's turn the virtual floor over to Shara and hear more about her research.
Great. All right, so thank you, and let's start. Let's talk about teeth, right? So as I mentioned, teeth preserve better than any other part of the body, and that's one of the very cool things about teeth. And you already saw this one slide that came up earlier. On the left are some of the hundreds of teeth from a Neanderthal site from Krapina, Croatia, which are 130,000 years old. And on the right are teeth from the site of Cima de los Huesos, which are 400,000 years old. And you can see, just by looking at them, you can see the white part, right? The tooth enamel, it looks just like the tooth enamel in your mouth, right? So this is the level of preservation we have with teeth, and they make up a bulk of the fossil record. And that's why, one of the main reasons why I study them. And what I do, which is paleoanthropology, is really one subset of dental anthropology, which includes a number of other, you know, kind of sub-disciplines. There are people who study forensics using teeth. They might do like what Tanya Smith does and try to age individuals by looking at the cementum or the growth lines in the tooth itself. There are people who study growth and development and the interaction between how long it takes to grow a tooth and how many cusps you have, for example. And this is a really, really fascinating and new area of research. Then you have people like me who do paleoanthropology, who take dental traits, either macroscopic or microscopic, and use them to answer all sorts of questions in human evolution. And then you have bioarchaeologists who use tooth morphology and tooth size, and also tooth wear to reconstruct diet, cavities to reconstruct health, and the kind of bumps and grooves and things I do to look at ancestry. And the interesting thing is that if you look around the world, people have different dental patterns, right? In these kind of, if you go out to like these extreme areas, you know, the peripheries of the world. So for example, in the Americas, people who have their ancestry in the Americas tend to have certain dental traits, one of which is a character to have ridges on the tongue side of the upper teeth, the incisors. If you have ancestry in Europe, you might run your tongue along the inside or tongue side of your upper molar, and you might find a little extra cusp that's called Carabelli's cusp. Happens in high frequency in people with European ancestors. If you have your ancestry in South Africa or Southern Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa, I should say, you might have an extra cusp on your lower molar on the tongue side called cusp 7. And if your ancestry is from, let's say, Northeast Asia, you're going to have characteristics that actually are very similar in many ways to that of the Americas, like that shoveling on the incisors, or as you can see in this upper right-hand corner, these teeth are kind of V-shaped. That's called winging. That's another characteristic of having a Northeast Asian ancestry. And if your ancestors are from Australia, you'll have unique characteristics too. And these, of course, are patterns, right? So you can be from Europe and you might have a cusp 7. It's just in a much lower frequency. But establishing these patterns is really important because we can then, since we know that dental patterns are indicative of ancestry, we can take that into the past, and that's what I've done. So here's a slide, and in the on the upper row are Neanderthals, and the lower row are Homo sapiens, or modern humans, and they're just different teeth. Starting on the left is the lower fourth premolar. The Neanderthal is different because it's asymmetrical in shape. It has more cusps on the tongue side, and the cusp on the tongue side is connected to the cusp on the cheek side by a crest, which you can see here. The middle tooth is an upper molar, first molar. And I've already talked about the differences in the cusp sizes and in the shapes of the tooth, which you can see here. And then on the left is a lower molar. The Neanderthal has a crest that connects the two cusps in the front of the tooth, mid-trigonic crest it's called, and you can see in Homo sapiens, it occurs in a much, much lower frequency. So we're talking about 99% Neanderthals, and in some human groups, maybe up to 18%, and in other groups, 0, right? So these characteristics distinguish Neanderthals from Homo sapiens. There's others, but these are just some. And I developed with my colleague, Tim Weaver, a statistical method that we could basically take an unknown individual and score all the dental traits, put them into the computer program, and it would give us the probability of being a Neanderthal or Homo sapiens. And that was something we did because we were interested in this question about who made the Aurignacian or other early Upper Paleolithic industries. So there's a time period in Europe where Neanderthals and Homo sapiens overlap in time. We know that. We know that we intermated with them. Most of us carry between 1% and 3% Neanderthal DNA, right? So we know they had contact with one another. And for forever, right, we assumed that Homo sapiens were making art, these kind of modern humanly looking tools. And then what happened is a lot of these key sites, for example, Vogelherd here in the lower left, this skull was redated using direct dating methods, and it turned out to be only 5,000 years old. So that kind of put people into a tizzy. Then they thought, well, oh my gosh, if that's only 5,000 years old, then who made these little these figurines, the little horsey and the little elephant figurines that are also from Vogelherd? Well, maybe it was Neanderthals. That's what some people were saying. And the early cave art from Chauvet Cave, which I'm showing here, or the beautiful flute from Höllefels, Germany. These are old. They're very old, and during this time period when Neanderthals and Homo sapiens overlapped. So the question became, who made them? So we went through all of these sites in this paper where you had kind of transitional or very early modern tools, and maybe only teeth or mostly teeth. And what we found is that about 85% of the sites, most of the sites that had modern human culture actually had modern humans. There were a couple exceptions, and that's Saint-Césaire in France and Arcis-sur-Mer in France have Neanderthals that are associated with some modern technology. So, you know, these Neanderthals certainly were capable of making these kinds of things, or at least some level of art and modern technology. We don't know if they learned it from Homo sapiens, if they copied it, or if they did it independently, but they certainly had the capability. So that was a cool thing we were able to do with teeth. More recently, we used teeth in addition to other fossils to determine the identity of humans in North Africa, here at Jebel Irhoud, Morocco. In the 1960s, and this is what my talk is on, that you'll be posting a link to, this material was found at Jebel Irhoud. And you can see that these skulls, while it has a high forehead, there's also some, which is a modern feature, there's some primitive features too. So the back of the head's a little bit elongated, the back kind of sticks out and is a little flattened. Brow ridges are kind of big. So you have this kind of mixed signal. And the question was, are these Homo sapiens or are they some kind of archaic human? And so in the past 10 years, when they went back and re-excavated at Jebel Uhud, they found additional fossils, one of which is shown here in the lower left-hand corner. And they included teeth. And so we were able to show that these teeth on the left is the upper tooth, the maxillary, the upper molar, and on the right is a lower molar. And basically what these graphs are showing you is that they actually fall right smack dab in with modern humans, so Homo sapiens. So that helped us establish that Homo sapiens, our species, was present in North Africa 300,000 years ago. And it's one of the oldest sites that has our species. And that it was coming from North Africa suggests kind of a evolution of Homo sapiens in multiple areas in Africa, not just like one core area. And then another fossil I'm working on now, a fossil I'm working on now with Rick Potts at the Smithsonian is this jaw, and I have this is a cast of it here that you can see. It has only one tooth, and that's shown here on the slide. And we were able to tell from the dental morphology and the size and all these things that I study that it's really kind of undiagnostic. It's not Neanderthal. It's it doesn't have anything unique to Neanderthals. It doesn't have anything unique to Homo sapiens. And what's interesting is it's about 900,000 years old. So it's kind of in the perfect place for it to be a member of a population that was perhaps ancestral to both lineages, which is exciting. And this year we're trying to get proteins out to do paleoproteomics, which would help. It's not DNA, but it still would help tell us on which lineage is closest. So that's, stay tuned. That's going to be exciting when we get that done. And then the last thing I wanted to mention are these new molars from a site called Nyanga. And Tom Plummer, he's going to be giving a talk about them later on this year, I believe. And I sent him a quick email this morning to find out what I could say about them, and he didn't respond to me. So I'll just tell you that they're really cool, and they're really big, and we have some really interesting conclusions to draw about them and their association with things at that site. And this happened when I just happened to be in Nairobi working on other material, and Tom had just come back from the field. He's like, we found this tooth. Can you tell if it's a hominin or human or not? And I looked at it, and and that just started, again, one of these collaborations. So because I had been there so long and I was staying a while, we were able to work over the next couple of weeks together. And again, just to kind of reiterate the importance of being somewhere for long enough to actually build relationships with people. And that's the end of my slideshow.
Well, thank you so much, Shara. And we are just waiting for that paper to be published. So Tom Plummer will be on lunch break at a TBD date based on a publication of that paper. So stay tuned. Well, again, just thank you so much. And we'll be now taking some questions from our viewers. If you are watching and have not gotten your question for Shara in, please get those questions into the chat right now. I actually have a first question to kind of kick us off. Shara, do you have a favorite fossil tooth?
I do. It would be, the one I didn't talk about is this tooth from Chiahe, and that has been attributed to a Denisovan. And it's showing up here, and you can see, if you can count, there are 3 little roots there. It's a second molar. This jaw is interesting because it doesn't have wisdom teeth, right? We're always interested in that. So this is kind of unique for an archaic human not to have their wisdom teeth. And this molar, the second molar, has 3 roots. And that, for me, was amazing. So this is a case of the fossil was kind of rediscovered in somebody's drawer when they passed away, and they scanned it, which you can see the scans coming up now, sent me the images, and I'm like virtually turning the tooth and taking my stuff, and I'm like, wait, oh my gosh, it has 3 roots. And this is significant because a 3-rooted lower molar is kind of like a huge identifying trait for for having Asian ancestry. And of course, that's where this fossil was found. And so it suggests that perhaps people who have Asian ancestry living today, if you have that trait, you might have gotten it from a Denisovan, because we know that the two groups intermated. So for me, this was like the first morphological. We know that Denisovans and Homo sapiens interbred because some people share their DNA, but this was the first morphological evidence of that intermating, and so that was like super exciting for me.
I love it. Okay, let's take our first question from the audience, and it comes from Pete. Hi, Pete. Nice to see you again. Well, I guess we're not seeing you, but nice to hear from you again. Pete says, I understand Neanderthals to have had underbites. Is that what would cause the ridges on the outer side of the top front of the teeth? And is that what you are seeing in modern Europeans as well?
That's a really good question, Pete. You know, I was actually at a conference once where I was talking about Neanderthal incisors, and I had a poster, and somebody came up to me and basically asked the same question. So good for you. The shovel shaping on the incisors of Neanderthals is completely different from that of modern people of modern Asian ancestry. So their Neanderthal incisors are really curved. They have kind of other bumps in addition to these ridges. And so in this case, it looks like they evolved independently of one another. And the kind of edge-to-edge bite, which I think is what you're talking about, as their teeth come together. Modern humans are weird because we have this, most of us have an overbite or some kind of malocclusion, but people in the past had kind of a perfect edge-to-edge bite with your front teeth and your bottom teeth come together. Yeah, it's funny because I'm actually reading a book now called Breath that is blaming all of our snoring and other kinds of problems on the fact that we have this overbite that's due to eating soft foods and stuff. So I haven't finished it yet, but it's kind of an interesting book.
Oh, yeah. Let me know what it is, and we can maybe share it after the episode.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So our next question comes from Jay, and this is from our website. He asks, what will future beings who may be descendants from us derive from our dental fossils?
That's a good question. I think that they will be really struck by the fact that if you go really far back in time and look at people's teeth, like Neanderthals, right? Or let's say before 10,000 years ago, that nobody has any cavities and people have really good dental alignment. Nobody needed to go to the dentist or go to an orthodontist. And then somewhere around 10,000 years ago, that changes, and it has to do with our shift to agriculture, eating soft foods, as I mentioned, but the kind of cavities and periodontal disease and all that we experience today is largely related to our industrialized diet. And so I think that's something that they will be incredibly struck by, just the level of dental pathology or cavities and that comes up after we switch to agriculture, and especially once we start adding sugar into our diet. Our teeth go to where in a handbasket.
Okay. We have another question from our website. This one is a anonymous question asker. What is the strongest pressure influencing teeth?
Wow, that's a good question. I'm not really sure if you mean like the shape or whatever, because the shape, like the cusp and the grooves and the things that I study, don't change very quickly. In fact, part of my dissertation started with questioning this assumption that people had made that Neanderthal teeth and Homo sapiens teeth basically looked alike. I was looking at them and I'm like, I don't think so. I think they look different. So I was trying to figure out a way to quantify that and actually show scientifically that was true. So that doesn't really change that much over human evolution. I think that what probably is influencing teeth the most now is our diets, and that's just because having diets that are highly cariogenic can have selective factors. The reducing of the size of our jaws leads to impaction of our wisdom teeth, for example, which now have to be extracted in a lot of people, and that is directly related to, people have shown this in laboratories with pigs, for example. feeding them hard diets and soft diets, that this kind of malformation of our jaws is really due to not chewing enough.
Interesting. I'm just thinking about my wisdom teeth that are no
Yeah,
longer with me.
yeah, me neither. Now I'm bummed, right?
Yeah. Okay, our next question comes from H. H asks, how has the pandemic affected the research activities of your students who are working on their dissertation projects?
Oh, hi, H. Gregory. They, some of them, it has really set them back. So one of my students was supposed to keeps trying to get to Japan to look at, she's interested in how hybridization between different species, how that is manifest in dental morphology, or these, bumps and grooves and shapes of teeth. She just can't get there. And so she's had to drastically reduce her sample size. And we have to, we don't want to keep going for another 5 years until things open up. So we have to, in a way, change our expectations sometimes about how much data have to be in a dissertation. Other students were lucky enough to, like Paula Cerrito, my other PhD student, she is working at a NYU dental lab. All the stuff is already there. She can still work in the lab. And she has not been affected very much, or if she has, it's been in a positive way because she's had a lot of time to sit home and write, and she's finishing her dissertation in remarkable light speed time.
Yeah, it's really impacted people in very different ways, and and I feel like in a lot of senses it's kind of like changed, because I feel like collections are becoming more focused as well, just because a lot of times you're not having to travel to have access to those.
Yeah. So yeah, for some people it's been really hard, but
Yeah.
a lot of places are opening up. A couple of our students, a number of them are actually out collecting data this semester. So that's hopeful. But
Well, that's wonderful to hear. Okay, our next question comes from Brandon. Brandon asks, do we know the evolutionary significance of wisdom teeth?
Well, the evolutionary significance is they help us chew, and they're super important. And until people switch over to agriculture, there's no problem with them. So they're important. They get worn down. They extend the life of our teeth, because they come in later than the other teeth, and so you get an extra 6 years of tooth wear on them. And the issue now, I mean, there are a couple cases in the fossil record where, as I showed you, one with the Shiahe mandible, where you have some fossils that don't have wisdom teeth, but for the most part they do. And for the most part, you don't really see impactions and missing wisdom teeth until populations make that switch over to agriculture and start having this reduction in the jaw size. And then they become a detriment, because if they can't come in and they get infections in your teeth often lead to death. I've seen plenty of individuals that had an abscess, a dental abscess at the time of their death, and it, reached up into their sinuses, or, the bacteria got into their bloodstream, and that was the cause of death. So yeah.
Yikes.
Nice.
Our next question comes from Eve. Eve asks, how do you juggle and prioritize your obligations with exciting new discoveries that you would love to get your hands on? This is a really good question.
It's a good question. Oh, Eve, I'm just behind a lot. That's what happened. I guess I prioritize based on who bugs me the most. So like, for example, with Tom, he's really on top of things, and he's like, hey, Shara, can you get comments back? And I'm like, okay. And, I have another, some Neanderthal remains from Spain that I'm working on that, they don't bug me quite as much. And so they're maybe down here my priority. So, I think I would have prioritized, I think, some of these, like the stuff I'm working on with Tom Plummer and Rick Potts, I mean, these are really important fossils. And so they have to take precedence because they're just more interesting and more important to the public, and more interesting to the public, more important to science than, let's say, a couple extra Neanderthal teeth that basically look like Neanderthal teeth, right? So that's I guess if I have to prioritize in a different way than who's going to bug me the most, then it would be that. I'm just being honest here.
No, it's a very good question. Okay, so our let me see, who is our next question from? Our next question is from Cheryl. Here we go. Cheryl asks, and Cheryl is the executive director of the Leakey Foundation. It's actually her anniversary of starting working at the Leakey Foundation today. So congratulations, Cheryl. So her question is, what one question of human evolution would you love to discover the answer to if money and time were not issues?
That's a really good question, Cheryl. I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're looking for, but I mean, I would love for us to be able to develop ways to get DNA from every fossil out there, regardless of whether they're from the Africa, or Indonesia, because I think for me, some of the most interesting questions are, what the heck is Homo naledi, and what the heck is Homo floresiensis sahaba, and where do they fit in human evolution? And honestly, they're a mixed mosh of stuff, and they're giving us a very mixed signal. There are some aspects of Homo naledi that look like extinct members of an extinct side branch, a Paranthropus, for any of you who know, and that's very confusing. So I just really would like to get my hands on some DNA, and how that would help us. I really think that would help us figure out. So those are these enigmatic, and Homo luzonensis, these really enigmatic, weird things that really make us stay up at night going, what do we really know? Those are the things I would like to resolve.
Cheryl actually has another question, not a scientific question, but so where can we buy your art?
You can go to sharabailey.com.
Okay, and we shared it in the link, and then we'll also share it in the follow-up email. So yeah, your art's just so cool.
Oh, thank you.
So my last question for you is, do you have any advice for those who are watching who may be interested in pursuing a career studying human evolution, or evolution in general, or science in general, I guess?
Yeah, well, my advice to anybody is to take the time to figure out what you're passionate about, and try it, and see, because I love what I do, but to be completely honest, if somebody back then had said, hey, you could make a career studying horse evolution, I might be studying the evolution of horses, or the evolution of domestication of horses, which is actually something people do, right? And I think that the more we know, like we can't know what we don't know. So, and unless you read a lot, reach out to people, ask if you want to be in somebody's lab, volunteer, ask them. The worst thing that can happen is that they'll say no. And I have this little plaque in my office that I always point people to, and it says, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And what I've always done throughout my entire career is I've just said yes. Jean-Jacques Hublin says, come to Leipzig. I'm like, I don't speak German, but okay, I'll go, or it's just like, I just say yes. I follow my gut. I'm, in general, I read a lot. That's where my questions about evolution come up, is from reading and questioning. And, but I really think too many people don't realize that actually what you love, you can probably make a career out of, whatever it is.
That is wonderful advice. And again, just thank you so much. This was a wonderful episode, Shara.
Thank you for having me. It's so nice to see you.
I know, it really is. It's really fun to get to, especially like at different points of people's careers, get to work with them,
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah. So next time on Lunch Break Science, we will be meeting Leakey Foundation Baldwin Fellowship Scholar and grantee Frederick Monthi, and learn about the latest in paleoanthropology in Kenya. So please join us for that. Thank you all for taking a break from your day and feeding your brain with the Leakey Foundation. Until next time, stay hungry for
Bye.
knowledge. Bye.
Lunch Break Science is brought to you by the Leakey Foundation and is made possible by the generous support of the Ann and Gordon Getty Foundation and Camilla and George Smith. Visit us at leakeyfoundation.org to learn more about the Leakey Foundation, today's guest scientist, and how you can help support human evolution research and educational programs like Lunch Break Science. Right now, all donations will be matched by generous donors, meaning your impact will be doubled. Miss an episode of Lunch Break Science? Catch up on past episodes and browse our library of Leakey Foundation lectures on our YouTube channel. Still hungry for science and can't wait till our next episode? Check out the Leakey Foundation's award-winning podcast, Origin Stories, available wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to the Leakey Foundation's YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or sign up for our newsletter to be the first to hear about exciting upcoming episodes and programs, as well as groundbreaking discoveries in human evolution research.